Something I wanted to quickly address in this tutorial series, we haven't mentioned really anything about the HTTP block. And notice, like maybe you already have done, in some of the other tutorials online and in documentations, you might find that they are utilizing the HTTP block and placing all the directives inside. So far in all the code in this tutorial series, we haven't necessarily been defining the HTTP block. However, we have been utilizing the HTTP block and just wanted to show you why that is. In the tutorials that we've covered so far, we've been utilizing the default config file to create our directives, our commands, to configure our web server. Now this file here is mirrored across over to our container, utilizing volumes to do that. Now notice if I go into my Docker compose file here, you can see that we're kind of using this volume here, mapping across this folder over to the folder on the container. So that's in the etc Nginx config file. So just going into my Docker, there's no containers. So let me just grab a container. So here I'm utilizing the extension for Visual Studio Code, Docker. So I've just gone ahead and just started my containers. You don't need to follow this step by step. I just wanted to show this and you can have a look in your build. So here we have the Nginx server. So this allows me to kind of navigate into the file structure of my container here, this extension. And we're just going to traverse over to the etc, and then we're going to go into Nginx, and then the conf.d folder. And this is the file that we're mirroring across using our volume here. You can see that we are mapping this across over to our file here. So what you'll notice is that there is also an Nginx config file here. Now, if you go into that file, so I'm just going to open that up, you can see that we have a few different configuration settings here. And one of them is an include. So you can see that we have the HTTP block here. We have some different kind of directives here. And then down the bottom here, we have the include. And notice if you look at the folder structure here, that's an include over to our conf.d configuration file. If you're not familiar with include, the idea of include, essentially what's happening here is that we're taking all of the configuration that we've defined in our default config file here, and we're placing it right here in between the HTTP block. Thus, all of our code is actually within the HTTP block. So needless to say, if you have tried to, in your default config, wrap this up all in a HTTP block, that will then cause an error. Because obviously at that point you've got two HTTP blocks. So that's why we haven't been defining the HTTP block, because it already is. Now something else of interest, potentially, is that you can see we're using star.config. So Nginx is actually taking any file within inside of this conf.d folder. It's utilizing any code in here that has the .conf file extension. So if we were to separate our code onto separate pages, as long as we have the .config set here, it will load all of that into our HTTP block here and run it as the live configuration. So of course, you don't have to do that. You could just place all the code here if you wanted to. You could take it all out, and if you wanted to work in a slightly different way, you could just go ahead and just replace it right there. And exactly the same experience. You'd have exactly the same experience. The code was just run because it's inside the HTTP block here, except now, of course, it doesn't necessarily bode well in terms of managing your code in blocks, because notice by using an include here, it does mean that we can separate our code base into smaller chunks inside of the conf.d folder. So I do hope that's resolved that question. Any other questions, let me know. I'll either make a small tutorial or just answer you directly. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.